I called this a possible trap game earlier in the week, and I caught all sorts of flack. Actually, I didn't call it a trap game. I put the title Trap Game ? So people lay off a little bit here. Understand, in the off season, we were looking at certain games that could have been the 2019 version of Iowa or Purdue. And of course, Nebraska came to mind. Northwestern coming off a Big Ten championship game appearance and a pretty good contest with the Buckeyes through about 3 quarters last year. They came to mind as well. So I know what it looks like going into it, but it's still the Wildcats on the road, and Pat Fitzgerald will actually have them ready to play and play hard. We know that. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts to break it down for us. Pat, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. Appreciate you jumping on board to break down Ohio State football for us with a rare Friday night game. So being a bit of a historian myself, I am embarrassed to ask this question, but I cannot think of a Friday night game, but I'm not 100% sure of there being an Ohio State Friday night game, but I cannot think of one. I'm going to hold back and let you answer because I'm coming up with 2 possible instances, but go right ahead.
The last time they played a regular season Friday night game was 1959.
Okay.
I believe it was against USC, if I remember correctly. So a bit before my time covering Ohio State, but yeah, it's been a while since they've played a regular season night game. There have been a few bowl games that have fallen on Friday nights. I don't remember when those were off the top of my head, but yeah, like you said, it doesn't happen very often. The Big Ten went to this as part of their TV deal with Fox a few years ago. Usually these games are some of the, no offense to these teams, but the less popular teams in the Big Ten. But the deal is that every Big Ten team has to do one. I think it's every 3 years. Ohio State, it doesn't sound like we'll ever host a Friday night game, but this was their turn to be a part of one. Penn State did one earlier this year against Maryland. So I don't think you'll see traditional powers of the Big Ten do Friday night games all that often, but every once in a while, every few years, Ohio State doing this one, which has upset a lot of people, especially high school football coaches in Ohio. For me, it just means I get another free Saturday to watch college football without covering a game. So while I get the tradition and angst of high school coaches, I'm not too opposed with it personally, for selfish reasons.
I had come up with a couple possibilities, but obviously they weren't. They didn't fill the Friday night slot. They played a couple kickoff classics, and this is way back, like in '86 against Alabama, when that was a separate game, a week before everybody else. But that must have been a Thursday night. I remember that in prime time. They played an odd matchup with a no seat during the Cooper era. Then it was only about 10 years ago that they played somebody out of the MAC. It must have been like
they played Marshall. They played Marshall on a Thursday, and I want to say 2010 to start the season. And then 2015, they opened the year on a Monday for that Memorial Day game against Virginia Tech. That was the Cardale Jones, JT Barrett, who will start, and the Braxton Miller spin move, that game.
Absolutely. Remember that one well. Obviously, consensus number 1 for that one. In the Marshall game, I remember I was in Vegas watching that game. Okay. All right, Pat. Get us set on the injury situation for the Buckeyes. We're at that point in the season. Somebody's going to be nicked up.
Yeah, it's surprising a little bit, actually. Ohio State has a few injuries that stood out when they put out there what they're calling their status report yesterday, I guess it was. Coming off a bye week, you would think this would be about as healthy as this team has been, but no Baron Browning, the middle linebacker who's rotated with Tuff Borland. He's 3rd on the team with tackles. They do not specify what the injuries are or any of that nature. So we are unsure on how serious this is for Baron Browning, but we know he will miss Friday night's game against Northwestern. Another one who is a starter that could miss the game is left tackle Thayer Munford. He had back surgery in the offseason. He missed, if people remember, he missed the Rose Bowl due to an injury. It turned out it was a back injury. He had back surgery, missed all of spring practice, came back and was good to go in fall camp, has played every game this season, but did suffer an injury against Michigan State. It was towards the end of a drive, if I remember correctly. and came off the field, came back in on the next drive and played the rest of the game, but never looked exactly comfortable. Again, Ohio State does not specify injuries, but we've heard, and I can't confirm this, but I've heard back spasms have been the issue throughout the week. So if that's the case, that's something that makes sense for him to be a game time decision. If he can't go, the normal replacement would be Joshua Alabi, who we saw step in for Brandon Bowen a few weeks ago at Nebraska and play very well. That was at right tackle. But Alabi is also out with an undisclosed injury. So those are the three key ones for Ohio State. Munford, obviously, still a possibility to play tonight, but both Browning and Alabi are out of this game. So they may have to go, if Munford can't go, to Nicholas Petit-Frere, who's a young player, very highly touted, very well thought of in the program, but just not a lot of experience. And I imagine they would probably move Brandon Bowen, as I mentioned, he's at right tackle, over to left tackle and put Petit-Frere at right tackle. But we just haven't seen that group together yet. So will be interesting to see. Obviously, Munford has been a key for them, and if he can go, they're definitely going to want him on the field, even against a Northwestern team that they're heavily favored against. You don't want your left tackle out regardless of the opponent, I wouldn't think.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down Ohio State as the Buckeyes play a rare, and we just learned, since 1959 against USC, first Friday night game, and it's a Big Ten contractual agreement that we have known about for a while. Didn't know when the Buckeyes would come up, but here they are at Ryan Field in the long grass and the Wildcats on a Friday night. So we got Pat from Bucknuts to help us break it down. Pat, I'm the type guy that I could dive into college football stats and a couple other sports, the NFL, and I could look at stats all day, but busy doing this, other things, personal life, so forth. I don't dive into the stats the way I would like to, but glancing at the Northwestern stats, it looks like a throwback to 1962. The passing game, the running game, Drake Anderson's doing a nice job at almost 5 yards per carry. But I watched the Stanford game on play. I watched the Wisconsin game almost every play. They hung in those games. They remarkably had a chance in both games in the final minutes. But the offensive production or lack thereof we're used to Northwestern not being explosive, but they have done very little, if anything, this year.
Yes, the offense is ranked 125th in the country. I'll give it moving the ball just 292.8 yards per game. So I feel bad that you actually went and watched those games, just because the Wisconsin game, if I remember correctly, was a lot of defensive touchdowns and setting up scores and whatnot. So yeah, this is a different Northwestern team than the one Ohio State faced last year in the Big Ten championship game. Clayton Thorson's not there anymore, graduated, the quarterback who actually led some pretty good offenses last year, some offensive performances, including coming out in the second half against Ohio State and scoring, I think, on their first two drives, if I remember correctly, to cut the lead quite a bit down. This offense is hard to watch. They thought Hunter Johnson, the Clemson transfer, former five-star quarterback, was going to be the guy. He has not been. Even in heading into the season, he didn't win the quarterback job until right before the season. And I think a lot of people thought that was coach speak by Pat Fitzgerald, just trying to keep competitiveness. But he has not looked good. They've even gone to the backups at times, starting one of the backups last week. So it'll be interesting to see who gets the start tonight. I guess that was 2 weeks ago when they started him against Nebraska. Neither quarterback has looked good. Both have one touchdown to 4 interceptions. Neither over 400 yards passing on the season. So it'll be interesting to see what Pat Fitzgerald does in this game. The one thing I will say is the last few trips to Ryan Field, Pat Fitzgerald has had this offense ready to go, and they've been able to hang with the Buckeyes and move the ball. Now, this is a very good Ohio State defense. Last time they went there was in 2013, and the defense was not as good. So I expect it to be a struggle for Northwestern to move the ball. As you mentioned, the running game has been better, but not great. So we shall see. Coming off the bye week, maybe they got some things figured out. Maybe they'll have some interesting plays up their sleeve, the Wildcats, but I just don't see how they move the ball consistently against this Ohio State defense, which is ranked right up there with the best in the country.
Absolutely. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts. Please join him and the rest of the crew there at 247 Sports covering Ohio State football. The Buckeyes taking on Northwestern on a Friday night. That might be the one angle that keeps our interest a little bit longer. Rare Friday night on the road, unique setting. Not that it's unique, but it just has a different feel than most stadiums in the Big Ten. Has that high school look to it. You can see the skyline. You can just see outside the stadium, and has that more intimate feel to it. And we'll see how long the grass is to kind of hold down the Buckeyes' speed. That was mentioned a few times by people this week. And again, a team that played Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, but is down this year. And we know that they're going to fight. We know Pat Fitzgerald knows what he's doing. And he's built a tremendous program considering the limitations there at Northwestern, and they're going to come out and most likely give it their best shot, and might scrap their way to a competitive game at halftime or into the third quarter, possibly, Pat.
Yeah, if they do it, it'll be, I think, on defense, as we just talked about. This offense has struggled, but the defense has been as good as I think you would have expected from Northwestern, ranked 26 in the country, only allowing 318.8 yards per game. Haven't allowed a team to get over 400 yards, held Wisconsin in relative check, as we mentioned earlier. So if they're able to stymie Ohio State's offense a little bit, slow down Justin Fields, J.K. Dobbins, we mentioned the potential issues on the offensive line with Thayer Munford out for sure, or Thayer Munford possibly being out and Josh Allaby definitely being out. If they're able to get pressure and slow down the running game, I could see this game staying closer, as you mentioned, till halftime or whatnot. I kind of see it playing out as the Michigan State game did 2 weeks ago, where Ohio State has to figure some things out in the first quarter, maybe doesn't move the ball quite like they would like. Similar defenses. Northwestern doesn't allow many big plays. And then as the game progresses into the second quarter, you see that Ohio State offense kind of come to life. Ryan Day and his offensive staff have done a great job at adjusting, making in-game adjustments. So in the end, I don't think it'll be a problem for Ohio State to move the ball. But Northwestern's defense is one of the better ones Ohio State's faced, even at their 1-4 record. If they just had an offense that could move the ball, get any points on the board, I think they'd probably be about where we expected them to be this season, as opposed to the bottom of the Big Ten at 0-3.
6 games in, 6 games to go. I'll let you give a mid-season grade in regards to what has been the most impressive / surprising portion of this season in performance by the Buckeyes.
I think there's 2 things that really stand out to me. The most obvious one is the defense. After being so awful by Ohio State standards last year, giving up big play after big play, this defense has been, as I mentioned, one of the top in the country, top 2 in total defense, a great scoring defense. It's just been a complete turnaround. Ryan Day replaced 4 members of the staff when he took over for Urban Meyer, and they've changed the scheme, less strict press man, going with some more zone concepts, playing a little off coverage, things like that, and it's really helped. The second thing I would say is the offensive line play. 4 new starters. Thayer Munford was the only one who returned from last year. A lot of young guys that were inexperienced. That was a big question mark coming into the season. They've been great. Opening holes. J.K. Dobbins is second in the country in rushing yards. Justin Fields has rarely been pressured, though Michigan State did get to him a little bit early in that game 2 weeks ago. But all in all, it's been a very good performance from the offensive line. The depth may be tested a little bit tonight, but for the most part, I imagine that Ohio State will be just fine, and this offensive line will continue to flourish. So those are my 2 big surprises through 6 games, and both the defense and the offensive line, I think you give them an A for what they've done halfway through the season.
Pat is off to Evanston, Illinois to take in the game. So, Pat, we appreciate you stopping by before you hit the air, and safe travels and enjoy the game. And most likely it's going to be 7-0 before we talk to you again.
Sounds good. I will. Thank you.